Okay. 17, 16 seconds. 15 seconds. Ooh. Look at the drip. Look at this steezy drip. Shout out Bleep Bloop Bass, one of my big inspirations. Okay, so today's a very special day because I'm going to be sharing, basically it's the workflow that I use to create like 80 or 90% of the beats in my mixtape called Tape 2, which is on SoundCloud. And I will pull that up for reference real quick. So let me pull that up so that I can show you the sound that we're going to be going for in this bass music tutorial. So let me just get to my SoundCloud here and find tape 2. One sec, bear with me. Okay, here we go. So that I used the same workflow as this tune. Same workflow as this tune, the next. So if you're looking for some inspiration when it comes to this workflow, you can check out my tape 2 that's on SoundCloud. People who helped me to come up with this workflow, and I will go into that as I get set up here. So I'm going to get a PhasePlant out because I'm going to be using PhasePlant as my bass. And yeah, so Ill Gates. And it's essentially the sample chopping recipe, and it's the mud pie recipe. So if you want to check out his recipe, go check it out. You know, mine's going to be unique to me, but at the same time, you're going to see a lot of similarities there. And really, the reason why I love this workflow, and I don't use this workflow all the time, but the reason why I love this workflow is because it's really quick. So if I want to bang out a track in like an hour or two, I can with this workflow. If I'm doing patch building in the project and doing all sorts of automations and stuff, then the track could take 6 or 8 hours for me to write like a whole like 2 or 3 minute long track. And that's fun sometimes. Sometimes I want to just take my time, take a lot of breaks, but if I want to bang out an idea really quick, I always reach for this workflow because I think it's really effective. So the workflow goes like this. You make a generative patch, you sample it for about 10 to 20 minutes while you're tweaking it, and you program it to be generative as well, or at least I do. And the main goal there is to basically create a nice wide palette of sounds that are all still interrelated because they're coming from the same patch, but we're going for a lot of variety. We're going for a patch that can create multiple types of basses, not just a single type of bass. So I'm going to build a patch that's kind of morphing between different types of basses. That way I have a large palette to choose from when it comes to chopping it up. So once I have that long sample and I'm happy with that sample, I'll chuck it in a sampler, and then I'll use fractal rhyme scheming, and this is another thing I learned from Ilgates, and they use the fractal rhyme scheming via duplication and change of that sampler that contains that long sample. And I'll use the sampler parameters like the start position, pitch envelope, volume envelope, and filter envelope to get each one of those to sit nicely in the mix. And my guiding principle with this is always going to be looking for that brain tickle. I want to tickle my own brain. I want other people's brains to be tickled by the sequencing. And I'm also using the skill of contrast. So every time I'm creating a response to a call, I'm thinking contrast. What would contrast this sound nicely? And I'm looking for that, and then I'll find it. And I'm also using a lot of randomization throughout this entire process. So I'll be going into this in more detail as I do it. But let's get started. So I want to just preface this by saying everything that I'm about to do, you can do in Ableton. It's just going to take a little bit more time. But if you use the Max for Live modulators, you can achieve this same sound. The key is modulators, okay? A lot of Ableton's native instruments don't have the craziest modulation options until you pull in a bunch of those Max for Live LFOs. And then once you have a bunch of those going, you can create these same or similar sounds. And the way I learned how to make these sounds is just by patching modular, because with modular, it's really easy to do these patches where the modulation is modulating itself and not just the sonic parameters. And therefore, you get these unpredictable modulations that are really good for generating a bunch of cool sounds that you wouldn't be able to think of in your head. And that's what I'm always going for. I'm always looking for, or almost always, I should say, because sometimes I'll get a sound in my head and make it, but almost all the time, I have my mind empty, and I'm just poking around, and I'm open to the computer spitting out something that I couldn't have expected, I couldn't have thought of, and is probably way cooler than I could have expected or thought of. So let's use that as the goal and just start creating a patch. So I'm going to start by just creating a MIDI pattern here. So let's do a MIDI pattern, and I'm going to start with a simple sine wave here and just a simple volume envelope, and that's it. So we got a sine wave and a volume envelope, right? So let's draw in a couple bass notes. I'm going to go for maybe a D. Let's go a little bit higher. Let's go to an E sharp, or an E actually. All right, so that's a pretty good length note for like an 808. So let's duplicate that. Let's get that one to be a little bit shorter, and maybe two of them. Right, and then I'm gonna just consolidate this and duplicate it, and then let's get a longer note here. And then let's duplicate that, and let's just ×2 that so that we have an even longer note, okay? So now I'm gonna loop this up, and you can see I'm leaving space in between because I want some release on this bass. So this is now sounding like this. And in my template, I have a pre-master render channel that's turned off that's already routed to sample the pre-master. So if I drag this into the pre-master group, now I can sample it easily by just record arming. So if I now hit record, it'll record that. Right? So now let's go in and get some modulation going. So I'll pull up a random modulator, and this is going to allow me to randomize things. So one of the first things I could randomize is a little FM on this sine wave. So let's do a little FM. Let's get another operator out, and I'm calling this an operator because it is below the output. See how this output is going to lane 1? If we look below this, there's no output. I could add an output, but I don't want to hear this. I just want to use this to modulate the pitch at audio rate. And so I'm going to take the output of this and I'm going to feed it into the shift. And then instead of modulating the volume of this oscillator or modulating the amount of this FM, I'm going to take a macro and I'm going to modulate the amount of FM with the macro. So now I can call this FM and I can use this to bring the FM in and out. All right. So the cool thing about that is I can now tie other things to this knob as well. So let's go ahead and randomize this knob a little bit. And I'm going to bring this harmonic ratio up to 6. So we get that classic sixth harmonic FM sound. So you can see how this is only modulating it half the time, and that's because this random modulator is set to bipolar mode. Here at the top right corner of the modulator, you have options for unipolar or bipolar or inverted. So, or actually, yeah. So the bottom one will invert it. So let's now listen to it when it's just unipolar. And you can see the note is triggering a new value. I don't want that, so I'm going to go right click on the trigger icon and select never so that it's just running freely. And now we'll get into the modulating of the modulators. So let's go and get an LFO. Actually, I'm going to use the new LFO table. And let's use this LFO table to modulate the speed of this random. And I'm going to go for bipolar on this. And that's because I want it to oscillate around a center point here. All right, so then we can use this LFO table to change the speed. So now that sounds like this. So we could try some different modulators here. Maybe this one. So we could now get another LFO, right? And then we'll modulate the modulator that's modulating the modulator that's modulating the amount of FM. So let's modulate the frame position to just sweep through this. And I'm just going to sweep through this really slowly. And I'll turn trigger off. So never. And then for this LFO table, go never. So now these are just running, right? And this is going to just start randomizing things inside our patch. So we can now complexify our FM patch by duplicating the operator and using a second operator. And I'll use this second operator to modulate the shift on the first operator so that we get a little bit more complex of an FM. And then what we can do is modulate that amount by the same macro. So now I'll change the harmonic to maybe like a 10th harmonic, and then we can adjust the overall level of our FM with these levels of the operators here on the left of the oscillator. So now I'm going to give a little bit more release. So one thing to be aware of whenever you're creating bass with FM synthesis, it can be really useful to high pass the top bass portion. So I'm going to just high pass it here, turn the slope up so that it's a little bit more dramatic, and put that around 230, 240 hertz. And now I'll just add in another sub oscillator. So I'll get a wavetable here, and that'll default an output. Let's give it some release, a little bit of attack. And now we have a separate sub, and I'm going to send that to lane 2. Or actually, I'll send that to lane 3. Actually, I'll send it right out so that we can use all our, well, we might actually want the sub in here. So let's actually send it to lane 1 like it defaulted, and just go with that for now. So that sounds like this. So the cool thing about this is now we can use our unison mode on the top oscillator, top bass, and we don't have to worry about our sub getting all stereo and weird. So let's use the unison mode now and play around with that. So you can see as soon as we shift this wavetable position, we're getting a lot more interesting upper harmonics. So I think I'll take another random modulator, turn the retrigger off, and then let's modulate the wavetable position of our main oscillator here. So we can take our random modulator and start randomizing more things, like maybe the filter cutoff, the Q, the blend, the spread, the detune. Let's give it more like 2 voices and just see how 2 voices sounds. Alright, so we're gonna want to compare the volume of these two, the sub and the top. So let's take a macro and map it to the gain knob on our sub so that we can turn this up. And then let's use another macro and map it to the gain knob of the top bass so that we can control that independently. And so I want that gain to be set at the bottom, and then let me control the whole thing. And then here, the same thing, so I'll set it at the bottom and then control the whole thing. See, we can then use the sub and the top independently so that we can get the ratio right. Because a lot of times when you're doing this type of sound design just from one oscillator, you're going to lose that fundamental as soon as you start introducing new upper harmonics via FM, wave folding, wave shaping of any sort. So I'll call that top gain. And the reason why I'm labeling these is so later on when I start to automate them inside Ableton, it's just a little easier to see, easier to read. I know what it is, I know what it's doing because it's named. So yeah, I want to turn the pitch bend range up to like 12, polyphony 1, give it a little glide time here. And now I think we're ready to, actually I want to mess with this pitch envelope here a little bit first. Alright, so that has a nice little kick on the beginning of it now, and I think the one thing I will do here is a little bit of pitch wobble, so I'll get an LFO here, and then actually I'm going to leave it on retrigger for now. Let's do bipolar, and let's just adjust the phase so that it starts like that. All right, and I'm going to just map this to the semitunes by right-clicking and doing 0.5%. That way, it's just going to give me a tiny little pitch wobble. And maybe I'll duplicate this LFO by control-clicking on the header. And then this one, I'll slow it down a bunch and just modulate the speed of the faster one so that we don't have the same speed all the time. And then maybe use this random to control the amount of this LFO so that it's not wobbling all the time. It's just wobbling in and out. So there's another condition where the character of this bass is going to kind of morph over time. So the next thing I'll add is another oscillator. So I think up here I'll add another oscillator, and this will be another top oscillator. I'm going to have this going straight out. And instead of an envelope, I'm going to use the new curve modulator. And let's go in here and just do something like this, so that there's a little bit of space at the beginning. It comes in a little bit late, and that'll sound like this. I'm going to pitch this up a whole bunch of harmonics, maybe 8. That'll just give us a little bit more harmonics in the top, and now I'm going to distort this. So let's get the glue clip out, and this is a rack that I've made where I'm basically just utilizing the soft clipping portion of the glue compressor and not actually compressing at all, or very little. The range is only turned up to 1.3 dB. So now let me just start to distort this and glue it all together with the glue clip. So let's get an LFO out, because I want to show how these Max for Live LFOs work. So we'll do a combination of random and or of third-party and kilohertz stuff, and I'll whip out some other cool plugins in a sec. So this is an LFO called LFOI that has a bit more random capability than your average LFO in default Ableton. And so we can use a couple of there's fold, wrap, different fold modes, and then you can do like cosine, which will be kind of a linear random. So let's take that and just modulate the drive on the glue clip, and I'm going to set the amounts to 55 and maybe 77. So we have a smaller range of drive going on, and it's always going to be driven a bit, but it's going to be morphing through that drive amount. Alright, so let's mess with our patch a little bit more now that we're going into distortion, because once the distortion's on there, everything changes, so we want to then go back to the source and kind of tweak this. So it could be cool to get some more really high upper harmonics in here, so I'm going to get another operator out. And for this, I want a noisy wavetable. So I'll go into the noisy wavetables, and I'm going to get something that looks cool. Let's just start with the first one, because we can always switch through. And I'm going to use this to modulate the phase instead of the pitch at audio rate of this top bass. So let me modulate this phase, right? And this is going to give us a ton of noisy upper harmonics. So what I want to do then is just use this modulator here, or actually let's get another random. Let's get another random out here. I'm going to close some of these. So I'm going to just group, or I'm just going to minimize these so you can see what I'm doing. So I'll get a random out, and we'll map the random to control the amount of FM, or I'm sorry, PM, phase modulation, by clicking this little gold star. So now we're going to be modulating randomly the amount. I'm going to turn the smooth all the way up and leave it on bipolar, so that, see, when it dips down below the midline here on the LFO, we're not going to get any activity when it's below that line. So it's going to kind of be more of an on-off thing than a consistently morphing thing. So let's hear how that sounds. So it could be cool to morph through this noisy wavetable a bit more. So I'll go back into one of our LFOs here, and let's use the LFO table, and let's modulate the frame position by a little bit, just a little bit, and then use this slower LFO to modulate the frame position again. So it's not only slowly sweeping through the entire waveform, but it's also a little bit quicker wiggling. So let's hear that. So that's sounding good so far. Let's continue this chain. So now I'm going to get out some heavier plugins. So I'm going to get out my Saturn II and going to just distort this a bit more. So I have a preset already built for Sephiroth's basses, so I'm going to pull that up. And this is just more of that same generative modulation stuff. I'm going to go on superb quality and linear phase because I want it to sound clean, and I'm not afraid of using a lot of processor because I'm going to render this out once I have it to a certain point. Alright, so that's sounding kind of cool. I'm going to go ahead and get a Pro Q and put it after the glue clip before the Saturn and just dip out some of this 200 hertz. Alright, give it a little boost on the highs, and then again, after the Saturn, I'll put another EQ here and just do the same thing again. So I'm thinking that it could be cool to have some rhythm coming in and out of that sub. So how do we do that? Well, we could get an LFO out, and we can modulate the volume of the sub-oscillator like this. So this will give us a wobble in the gain of the sub, which will cause all the distortion to change. So let me get that going pretty quick and do like a shark fin. So I'm going to do a bit of a shark fin here. And then check this out. We can use our random to modulate the speed of that wobble so that it's not just wobbling at the same speed the whole time. We're going to get random changes in speed on that wobble. Okay, so that's cool, but I don't want that happening all the time. So I can use a macro and I can control the amount of this LFO and then turn it all the way down. That way, this macro, we'll call it wobble, and it's going to wobble the sub. But watch, now the volume is all the way down on our oscillator. So what can we do? Well, we can turn this oscillator all the way up again and then use this same wobble macro to modulate the level in the other direction. That way, the level's up, and then when I turn the wobble up, it turns up the amount of the LFO, and now it's wobbling, and now I turn it back down, and the sub's just a consistent level. So now let's do a little bit of a binary thing going on. So it's like an on-off, and we can do a semi-random on-off modulator very easily by just going into the LFO editor here and doing a step modulation, something like this, right? That would be on-off equally as much, but it could be cool to have like a little bit more random. So let's do something like that. And then maybe just come in here with the curve editor and just give a little bit of a curve to that so it's not so jumpy. And we'll get a nice little morphing between a wobble bass and a more sustained 808 style bass. And we can slow this way down and then just control the wobble knob. So now we'll be going back and forth. And we can also use one of our modulators to, again, modulate the speed of our modulator. So that way it's not going to be the same twice. Give it a little bit more release on all these oscillators. So this oscillator, I'm going to play around with this oscillator now, this little top oscillator that's not doing any FM. It's pitched up 7 harmonics, and it's just going straight into the chain. So let's play around with the unison mode on this. There's some interesting unison modes for atonal stuff in here, like the frequency stack. And this frequency stack can make some really wild sounds. So I'm not hearing much of that, so I'm going to go back to the clean sine wave and take the unison mode off. I think a clean sine wave's good for that. So you see that oscillator's just poking up a bit, and I like that 7th harmonic for this. It's sounding pretty cool. All right, so now I think it's time to just record this, but maybe I'll get some filters out first. So you could use the Ableton filter with Max for Live LFOs to do this, and I'm just gonna go after this Saturn. And let's see, do I have any presets in here yet? I don't. Okay, so we're gonna get a random modulator out. I'll go large size on this. So first let's just get an LFO and just wobble a low pass. Very underrated. Did you hear that aliasing? Listen, when I turn off high quality, you'll hear this high frequency zzz, 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 as the filter wobbles. It almost sounds like Redux. When you turn the high quality mode on, it'll start oversampling. And I'll also turn this onto a different mode. Let's try extreme. And then let's go for a steeper slope and a big old peak. All right, so we can get another LFO that's going slower and maybe take off the, let's go in and turn it to linear. And let's turn this to linear. And this is gonna be going real slow. And then we can modulate, so see how it's now gonna go open and close, but also kind of open and close a little bit quicker. So it's doing kind of like a staggering thing here. I can't stand it when like plugins won't let you pause and play the playhead when you're like in them. I don't know if that's what it was just doing, but I'm gonna go ahead and modulate the speed of this faster LFO with the slower LFO, something I do a lot. Those are some cool sounds that contrast the full frequency sound nicely. Let's get a high pass out here and modulate it as well. Let's hear how that sounds. All right, so I'm gonna keep doing this with more filters. And now to modulate between the state of the filter and the non-filter, I'm just going to turn the glide down on an LFO and then map that to the mix amount. That way our filter's only going to be on like half the time. And I'll turn that all the way up there. So now it's going to be going back and forth, maybe a little bit of glide on that, and then turn it like way down. modulate the speed of this switcher a little bit as well, so that it's not always going to be the same. And cool, so I think maybe after that filter, like another distortion, I'll get the decap out, because decap's a great affordable distortion, and it sounds really analog, which sounds great on filters that sound really analog, like the Volcano. So we can make this generative by just getting out some LFOs. So I'll get an LFO. And we can make this generative by using just some simple LFO techniques. So I'm going to LFO the drive. I'm going to get another LFO out, and I'm going to LFO the mix. And then I'm going to get another LFO out, and I'm going to use this LFO to LFO my LFOs. So make the things that are making the things, do things, right? So I'm going to modulate the depth of this one, maybe get another LFO out and just modulate the depth of the other one. The depth is basically the amount. So now let me slow these down a little bit. And now it's just about adjusting these ranges. So with the drive, I want it to be pretty driven, maybe 33%, and then let's go all the way to like 81%. And then for this decapitator, you can see I turned the auto gain adjust off. You can leave that on, but I'm going to leave that off. And then let's just go back and forth on the mix. And now let's hear this and fine tune it as I listen to it. Okay, so because I'm streaming, I've already tapped out on my processing power. I'm now using like basically my whole processor just on this patch. So now I'm going to just record it and just kind of mess with it as I record it for a little bit, and then we'll write the track. Okay, I need to change my sample rate. Hopefully this doesn't crash. I think it might crash. Okay, it didn't crash. Sorry, I'm doing this at 96 kilohertz, which makes no sense. Okay, now I'm on 2048, so I should have a little bit more. Yeah, a little bit more. Oh no, Ableton's stuck. All right, I'm gonna go and save this. Try to save this. Oh no. Oh god. Okay, we're fucked. We're fucked here. Oh no. What if I set the sample rate back? Or the buffer size? I shouldn't have done that when I was recording, so you're learning from my mistakes right now. Oh no, I don't want to lose these sounds or this patch. Okay, we're good. Okay, now I'm gonna change my buffer size up to 20. Did that work? Okay, so there's our first sample. Oh, now it's not letting us record. Okay, so I'm gonna save as. Oh, my caps lock's on. So I recommend, if you don't have time to do this before a writing session, just do these like at night, these sound design sessions with these long files, and save them, because I have like a whole stack of these. I could have just grabbed one and showed you the chop, but I wanted you to know the whole process. So so hopefully it's not broken. Might have to close and reopen. Failed to merge projects? What are you talking about, Ableton? What are you... Ableton, you suck sometimes. You really suck sometimes. Bitwig would not have done this to me. Alright. Okay, well, at least you saw what I was doing, right? We can still do the chop part. Exit, what's good? Yeah, let's see if we can resurrect this project. Jesus. Horrible. Horrible. Oh my god, the project's broken. The project's gone. There's not even a project. Oh my god, let me see if we can recover from opening Ableton this way. Holy shit, is there just sound blasting? Okay. Very sorry for the inconvenience here. Very much apologize. Sorry. I'm very sorry. But we're about to write a sick track. I'm about to show you the sampler chop technique, so bear with me. Alright, so the patch is still alive. Oh my gosh. But did it reset all my presets? Yes. It reset all the stuff. God damn it, I hate you, Ableton, sometimes. You just really suck. You really suck sometimes. So we're gonna pretend that we're using those sounds, right? We're just gonna pretend that we're using those sounds. I'm gonna save, because I'm stupid, and I didn't save before. Sample chop recipe, and save. right, so let's go off, and I guess I'll just show you. Oh, maybe we can find the sample. Let's see. Search. Go. No new candidates. Are there samples in here? Haha! The samples do exist. Oh god, are they corrupted? Why won't it let me drag them in? Still has missing files. No new candidates. Okay, those files just got totally screwed. So, anyways, I have a top bases group here in my thingy. I'm gonna take this OTT off. Let's just simplify everything. Let's just go base. Inside the base, I'm gonna put a sampler. When I default, I set my default MIDI channel to have things that I use the most. So an external instrument, a PhasePlant, and a blank sampler. So let's get a blank sampler out, and let's put a sample in there. I'm gonna go to my idea jams, which is what I call mud pies, at least in my sample pack. Shout out Mr. Bill, that's where I got that term from. I always liked that term. Idea jams just is a cool term. Let's go for a PhasePlant wild patch, because that's kind of what we were using. So something like this. Oh wait, no. Ah, is there a way to like bounce? Let's use a modular sample. I'm gonna go into my 22. I actually made one just recently. Alright, this has bass in it, and it's very long. Okay, so it's a very long bass. So the first step is to just get a call and response going. We're gonna be using the rhyme scheme of PVRD, which I learned from the shout out Il Gates. Big up, big up. Present the motif is P. Vary is V. Vary the motif. Repeat the motif, that's the R. And then do something different, which is the D. So present, vary, repeat, do something different. And then a little extra sauce that I learned through the dojo was you can do 2 cycles. So present, vary, repeat, differentiate, and then present, vary, repeat, destroy. So that will do that on our second iteration. So what I'm going to use is the technique of just duplication and change. So what I want to do first is just set up this MIDI note. So I'm going to do a C3, which is the original pitch of the sample. And I'm also going to do something right off the bat that I found helps, which is just to establish a root note, or at least just to give me a reference, right? So we'll go in here to this PhasePlant, and we'll just do a really little kind of note up top, just so we have a sense of pitch. So let's maybe do an E note. And then I'm just going to turn that way down. And let's give it a little less decay. Alright, so that'll just give us a little sense of E. Alright, so I'm going to just stop this first note around where the snare is going to be. So let's do a note that's like this, a little bit before the snare on the 3. And let's find a chop. So I'm going to go in here and make sure everything's loud enough. First, I give a little bit of attack. I'll change the voices to 1 just in case I want to do bendy things. and then also turn the glide on so that I can do bendy things. And let's do like maybe 100 milliseconds of glide on that, or 80 milliseconds. All right, so now I can jump around in this file and just test things out. So I'm gonna loop this. I'm actually gonna use this MIDI note, this little ping, this E ping, as a snare kind of placeholder for now. That way we have a sense of where the 3 is. All right, you know what? Actually, let's go into... Let's find a different sample. That sounds like a pretty good one. Let's see what's in here. I want to show it to you with that PhasePlant style bass, so I'm actually going to have to dive into one of my tracks where I did that and just get that sample. So let's see, I know I used it on Mad Contagious. Yeah, so this track is in tape 2, and we'll use this bass. So I'm just going to add the recorded folder here so that we can go in and find one of those samples. So it's going to be probably one of these right here. Alright, so this is the one, I believe. So let's see how this sounds. Alright, so once we have our first note, I'm going to actually first try to get that to hit the E. So what I like to do for this is just pitch it up a couple octaves so that my ear can perceive the pitch easier. So that's hitting E and E sharp, or F. I'm sorry, there's no such thing as E sharp. Alright, so do a little bit of a kind of a dotted sort of pattern here with the bass, and then duplicate. Right, so now that this is set up, what I'll do is just use the 0 key to mute and unmute these different MIDI channels, these MIDI notes, so that I can find a response. So let's go here and just find a different chop. And I like to do this in context. I'm going to listen to this whole 2-bar section and then just play around with different start points on this new sampler. All right, so I'm going to treat this whole 2-bar section as the first part of the phrase. So I'm going to create a third little chop here. And this will be the third kind of word in our first phrase. And maybe I'll try pitching this up an octave. So let's try pitching it up an octave and turn it down slightly. Okay, so that's our first phrase there. That's sounding pretty cool. We know it's in E minor. And so now I can just put some drums here. I'm going to just go with a very simple beat. Something maybe like this. I don't know. I'm gonna just do a quick hat. So let's get a hat. Use some Sephiroth hats from the Patreon pack. Oops, I did not meant to double click that. Yeah, let's use one of these hats. So I like to just take like little tiny chunks of these hats sometimes. Like a tiny piece of the hat. These are FM hats that I made with the IntelliGel shapeshifter. So yeah, so I'll just do some little hat rhythm here. I'm gonna offset them slightly, offset the second one even more, and then let's kind of duplicate that and see how that sounds. Shorter note here now that I changed the kick pattern. One thing that's nice with these, and I was talking about contrast before, but something that's really nice to correspond to these basses, and something that's really useful to just have in every song, is a dedicated sub that you may or may not need to use, because a lot of these sounds that I'm using right now, they have a lot of sub in them, so it's not really a problem. But for response or for filling in holes between basses, this is a useful patch. So let me just build this patch real quick. It'll take 2 seconds. So I want to unmute the channel. So it's just some amplitude modulated white noise, and then high pass it. And I'm going to give this less decay, and I'm going to have this sub be super loud the whole time. All right, cool. So now we can use that in our track to just kind of fill in some of these holes, strategically speaking. I think bendy notes are pretty cool for subs. I find that they hit really hard on systems. So let's do some bendy notes here. So what if we bend up an octave here? And then what if we kind of like do a bend up and then back down here? So that's cool. I'm going to put the samplers just in their own group here. And I like to bake in some effects before I start really sequencing this. So I'm going to get a vintage verb out, which is just one of my favorite reverbs to use by Valhalla. And then I'll keep it fully wet. I'm going to group it. I'm going to get a volcano or whatever filter of your choice, or EQ, and just put that after and just do an Abbey Road style EQ here. Maybe around 300 hertz and around 2000. Gentle roll off. And then I'm going to create a dry chain and then map the wet chain to a macro and go to the map and do maximum 0 dB so that I can use the whole range of this macro, call it reverb thrower. And this is going to allow me to throw reverb whenever I see fit without the reverb getting in the way. So I'll do this on the group, call it bass tops. And I'm just going to throw this reverb at the end of these notes and see how that sounds. So these reverbs will be more or less tonal depending on how much diffusion is going on. So if you want to go into this diffusion, you can turn that down and we'll get a more tonal result. And same with the shape, you can turn the size and the attack down, and that'll kind of give you a more tonal result. And then if you turn the pre-delay down, that'll also help with the more tonal result. And then also turn it to now mode and then maybe a smooth plate. And that will have a much more tonal reverb. And I'm also going to just get a utility and try turning the gain up into this. And then also, if you EQ on the way into your reverb, then you can really sculpt the harmonics that are accentuated by that reverb. So if we take some of the sub out and then boost some of these mids, we might get a better sounding reverb. Cool, so that's sounding pretty good so far. Now we can continue on our journey. I'm gonna mute this old little E note snare poser patch, and let's duplicate the whole thing. So I'm gonna select the whole thing, and then Shift Control D will duplicate time, or you could have just duplicated the whole thing, but I like doing duplicate time. And then here we have our phrase, right? So we can duplicate all three of these samplers and get a D to our P. So I'll go and delete the old MIDI. Sometimes it's even nice to change the whole color. So I can right click and assign the color to the clips so that we can really see what's going on here. All right, so now we just change this. So I'm gonna listen to context and then just kind of find a different chop. So it could be cool to switch this rhythm up. So let's delete this. Let's extend this note out. And then let's do like maybe a pitch bend on this one. So I like to turn the pitch bend up, and then this is a really fun pitch bend where you kind of bend up from super low. So maybe we'll elongate this out too, and then delete this sub note here. think those two contrast each other pretty nicely. So Shift Command duplicate time, Shift Control duplicate time, and now we have our P, which is blue, right? That's our P phrase. Present the motif, present the sound, vary the sound, and then we don't have to worry about this because it's repeatable. So repeat the sound. And then for this, we're going to do something completely different. So I'm going to go and duplicate these 3 samplers along with all the everything. And then let's just move, let's just move this MIDI over to the end. And let's listen to the whole phrase, and I'm going to switch up the drum rhythm here to be more suitable to a turnaround. Because essentially this last fill, this destroy, or this differentiate, that's really a good chance to do a turnaround. So let's listen to this. Alright, so let's stop the bass on the snare. And then with the hats, let's get rid of this one. And then let's do a little roll with the hats. And then instead of this normal thing going on right here, let's just do kicks like this. Little kick roll at the end. So what if we go up with this instead? A different type of sound at the end here. So I'm just going to leave a hole for now. And then let's change the start point so we have a different sound. And I'm also going to change the color just so we don't get confused. Let's change the start point of this one. So a cool way to do pitch bends also is to modulate the transpose. This is another Ale Gates trick. If you modulate the transpose, it's different than automating the pitch bend. You can see we have a grid that snaps to semitones, and it's not going to get stuck like the pitch bend gets stuck. It's never going to get stuck. So you can leave it down, and it won't get stuck, which is really the main strong suit of modulating the transpose. And it's actually smooth sound, so it's not steppy like if you're modulating the transpose on Simpler or Operator. It's smooth. So listen to this. So let's modulate down at the end. And then maybe start it a little bit sooner so we get more of that modulation. so we have our PVRD here. This is our present, vary, repeat, differentiate. And then I'm repeating that entire phrase here. So repeating, varying, repeating, and then destroy. And I left a hole here because I want to use a different type of sound design or a different type of sound even to really create a lot of contrast there and make this moment really stand out. So what I can do is just grab, like, I don't know, a vocal chop. Maybe a little amp on that reverb could be cool. Let's try that. That's a really cool EEPROM trick that I learned on YouTube. Maybe let's duplicate it and pitch one of them down like 5. We could group these and then just put one reverb on the group with the amp and this gain automation that's muting. So we could put that on there and then delete the old one off of this one. That way we're just using one, but we're using 2 samples. So let's try a blues maybe. Remember what I said about being able to sculpt the tone of the reverb on the way into the reverb? So let's kind of EQ this to make it a little bit less intense. Cool thing is tube delay. So we could try maybe a little bit of tube delay into the distortion and then reverb after it, maybe? So let's get a little tube going on with this. Another cool effect is the scratch rack. Another Ilgates effect here. I love this effect. So I can get a scratch rack out, and we can maybe scratch the vocal chop here on the group. So what if we have it scratch in and then scratch out again? That could maybe sound kind of cool. All right, so I'm gonna just sample this group, 24, a little turnaround group. All right, so that way I have that as a sample now, and I can kind of manipulate it. So let's see. So what if we get a little bit of delay and we do like a little filtered delay with this end piece. So what I can do is take this end piece and I'll just reverse it here so that we have that first chop, and then let's put a bunch of delay fully wet with the filter. And then maybe modulate the time just ever so slightly. All right, and then I'll just freeze that. And now I can take this, put it on a new channel, unfreeze it, delete the delay. And now if I take this tail and reverse it, I can put it before and it'll lead in nicely. Maybe even a little bit more like this. Maybe we take this last bit of the tail and I'll just cut it right like that. And then since it's warped, I can use shift and just pull it out like that and stretch it. And it's my default is texture mode. So we could get a little bit of, oops, it's not, yeah. Okay, so texture mode and then like maybe medium grain size. So it could be maybe cool to like get a little bit of a scratch sound on this, like a little triplet scratch. So I'm going to turn on the triplet grid by Control 3, Control 2 to reduce the grid to 3 triplets like that, and then A to turn on automation mode, and then let's do fully wet on the shifter device, or actually let's modulate the shifter device to go from fully dry to fully wet on this little part. And then we could modulate the coarse knob here. And let's try just doing a couple little scratches with the coarse knob on shifter. And maybe like end this early like it's a chopped record and like scratch it up. And maybe we could select all of this and just ramp it up like this. I didn't like that little scratch in context. It sounded cool alone, but in context, I don't think it slapped. So what I want to try to do maybe is just a little bit of a, I don't know, a little triplet glitch, like a little 16th triplet glitch sound, right? Maybe even faster. Maybe something like this. Maybe a little filter automation on that. maybe it just like opens up like a low pass filter opening up like this. Maybe a little bit of reverb on this. We're getting bogged down on this turnaround, but turnarounds are very important, so it's good to spend time on them. Maybe if we did have a snare here, it would maybe help. Maybe a little laser action. Bit of a laser action. Shout out Zach Countryman for this sample. So now that we have a 16 bar increment, let's talk about like some escalations. So one easy way to escalate, so now we have 32 bar section because I duplicated it. So now we have a PVRD, another PVRD, another PVRD, and another PVRD. But when I said rhyme scheming, I mentioned fractals. Quick sidetrack to anyone who doesn't know fractals. Check out, if you don't know fractals, check them out, okay? Basically, it's the same shape repeated infinitely, and it always makes the same shape on a macro scale. So this is kind of what they look like. You know, there's a lot of types of fractals. There's the Mandelbrot sequence, which was kind of like one of the first fractals that they found. But essentially, we can also look at hexagonal, like sacred geometry, because you find this in sacred geometry. don't know why my caps lock keeps going on. All right, so if you look at this, it's a circle that makes up kind of a bigger circle. They're interconnected parts that they all fit together. So basically, in rhyme scheme world, we can look at this as a PVRD, but we can also look at this as a PVRD, and we can also look at this as a whole PVRD. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, we created this, duplicated it, and changed it, and then we had all these created, so we duplicated those, and then just changed the last part. And then we duplicated all this. So if we're treating this as now the P, then this would be the V. So I would vary all of this, right? And that's how you get a switch up. So let's do that now. But first, let's talk about escalation. And one of the easiest ways to create an escalation from the first 16 to the second 16 of a 32-bar drop is just simply either omit the hats in the first part or add more percussion in the second part, instead of keeping the same hat pattern as the first part. So let's first try to just delete the hats on the first part, right? Another thing you can do is start withholding snares, right? So let's play around with muting some of these snares. I'm just going to use the 0 key. Going from more curveball-y, more sporadic, to more consistent, right? And so that creates a sense of relief and escalation in the energy curve of the track. If you don't know what the energy curve of a track is, that's totally fine. I will draw it in MIDI for you. So, you know, we have a pattern that's kind of going up and down, right? This switch up, this new section, to go up a bunch, right? So we start to getting this curve that stretches out over the whole track, and it's almost like a bar graph. Let me go and legato these so it looks better. Do with our bass pattern to make it step up a notch, feel like a switch up, also be interrelated, and how can we give ourselves a lot of room to work with? Well, I'm going to duplicate all these because they're just samplers. They really don't take a lot of processor, a lot of CPU. Under the hood in Ableton Project, they're just one long sample. It's not duplicating all these samples until you collect all and save or whatever. And even then, it's still just that one long sample, and Ableton just uses its sampler to reference that one long sample. So really, this is a very efficient way to work. I'll just delete that, and so now this will be our switch up drop. So let's increase the frequency, right? Let's increase the frequency of our energy curve. And one way to do that is just to play around with the rhythm of the bass. So what if right here we go into a more driving sort of rhythm? We could maybe shorten this and duplicate it so it's like boom, boom. And then we could make maybe this more percussive. Let's try a different chop here. So let's maybe keep that going. I'll play with the rhythm in a sec. Let's keep that going and mute the sub note here, and let's see how that sounds like. All right, so that's already sounding pretty cool, but let's give a little bit of space between these notes. Let's find a chop that hits better now that we have the rhythm. So let's change this one now. Keep this PVRD thing going on, right? So we could just shift this over to here. But I think it could be cool to go down a half step. And let's have this one kind of wobble a lot more too. And a cool way to do that is to use the loop mode. So I'm looking for some cool movement that I can loop up right now. So I'm going to just keep shifting around. Something there I could maybe loop up. So let's change this to loop forward, and then let's bring the loop brace in so that it's real close to that start point. Let's zoom in and let's find a cool little loop we can do. And the drums are covering this up, so, and the sub, the other sub, so let's kind of mute some of that. So I want to change these two, because this is kind of our call, so let's go boom boom, and boom. Could be cool to go down a half step on this, I think. Bah, bah. I think we could escalate the groove further by actually changing the kick pattern by making it more sparse. And then if you want to add extra emphasis to a bass wob like that, it's cool to just take the hats out too, like this. It's right here. And then maybe since we took kicks out, we could put them back in here. Take this first thing that we made here and then put it right there so that it's PVRD in the drums. Also increase the amount of call and response we're doing with the variations. So I'm going to duplicate our main call here, and I'll mute those, and I'll mute those, and then we can switch up the call here. And actually, I'm going to close this group so I can really see what's going on. And since we made a new pattern there, I'm going to delete this stuff. And let's take this stuff and let's put it here. And then remember, we want to get this and use this new one instead. So we'll unmute that, and then let's find a different chop for this and maybe do like a pitch bend or something. So if you want to play with the pocket, there's this new device called the Align Delay. So I can plop that on the bass tops group, and if I lock the left and right here, this is what it looks like. You can just start nudging by milliseconds everything to the right. So I'm going to start nudging all these basses to the right just to see if that sounds better in the groove. Like that could be different, just that one. So I'll choose a different thing for that one. right, so when I get to this point, sometimes I start feeling like I've kind of tapped those basses out. Not tapped them out, but you know, they're starting to get I'm starting to get a desire for a new type of sound. So I'm thinking maybe some granular stuff could be really cool. But one thing I'll add before I bounce this and granulate it is a bit of just snare reverb. So I could use a send, or I could create a send inside my sidechained group. So I have like a sidechained drums group here. And so that's getting sidechained slightly. So I could put this, take the audio from kick and snare. And then if I want to have multiple snares, let's duplicate the snare. And then I'm going to group these inside the drum rack. So Control G to group. And now we have a snares group. So I'm going to call this snares. And that's a group inside the drum rack. So what's cool about that is I can take the audio from kicks and snares, and then I can take the audio from snares, post effects, and then even if I'm switching up snares, all the audio is still going to come into this channel. Now if I set it to input monitoring, it's now going to hear all the audio that comes in. So I can put a reverb. Let's use Valhalla Room. And then remember, if you EQ on the way into reverb, you can really shape it, and then also EQ on the way out of the reverb to get rid of maybe some of the lows that might be created and some of the unnecessary highs and mids. So we can have something like that, and then we can turn this into a send by using a utility. So I'm going to just macro up a utility to have the max at 0% or at 0 dB. That way we have the whole macro to work with. And if we modulate this macro up at any point, it's going to let the audio come through into the reverb. So by default, if this is fully muted before the reverb, then we can send just what we want into the reverb. And then we can also have one of these after, and we'll use this as the mute to get rid of the tail, because usually the tails is going to be too long. Because you want the reverb to be present, but if you want it to be present, you got to crank that decay, and then the decay is too long. So you can't have both unless you have a mute after. So let's take let's think about adding emphasis to our snares, and let's do some reverb throws on our snares. Another utility just so I can control the volume of our reverb. So I'm going to turn it up like after the fact. And you can see I'm kind of increasing the frequency of those reverb throws to add to that overall arching energy curve of the drop. We want the whole drop's kind of like a build-up, you know? And the whole song's kind of like a build-up up until like maybe 3/4 of the way through, unless you really want to like max it out and then go chill mode the rest of the time. I mean, you can do whatever you want. This is just how I think about dance music, or like this, my bass music sound. So yeah, so now we have like some reverb throws, but it could be cool to have some delay throws as well, and maybe not just reverb. So let's go reverb, send, rev delay, send for the snare, or actually snare send. So this is our like snare send. And then we can group our Valhalla vintage, and then we can put something else in here. So let's get an Echo Boy. I like Echo Boy Jr. is actually pretty fire for this. So now what we can do is we can open up the chain selector, and if we drag out these two little guys here, we can actually blend between the two effects or have one or the other only if we want. So I'm going to map the chain selector to macro 1, and then let's just move to the Echo Boy and dial that in. So let's kind of A-B back and forth between these two. So I'll open add lane for each automated envelope. And then now I can see wherever they come in, so I can go back and forth on my chain selector. So we can go maybe delay for the first one, or reverb for the first one, because it's kind of not quite as cool as the delay. And let's just go kind of back and forth with this and see how this call and response is between the effects throws. And then let's also start to automate mutes. So let's get this lane out and I'll start to mute. So this is an emit in the whole mix. So it could be cool to mute it on that kick. Also create a nice kind of sidechain effect with this mute if you just do that. Alright, so now we have a little bit of cool effects going on, and we could actually modulate the volume of those effects over time to increase the overall energy building of the track. So let's have this get louder by like 2 dB, and let's have it start out by like -2. So it's going up by 4 dB over the course of this drop. So that subtle kind of automation over the whole drop is going to add a lot of extra, subconscious energy building throughout the drop. The last thing I would like to add here is just a little riser, like right here. So maybe we could just get a sound and stretch it out. So let's get a sound. Maybe a Foley sound. Those Foley sounds tend to contrast bass really dramatically. Yeah, shout out Barely Alive. That'll be a perfect sample to use. So let's just stretch this out. Warp it, texture mode, flux down, grain size up, ×2. And then let's get this to be like starting maybe around here. And we'll just rise up to where that turnaround is. And I'm just going to kind of fade the edges of this, and then I'm going to use the EQ here to just filter it in. So let's do a high pass in. So let's high pass it in and out. So I'll create a point on either end and then just drag that down. Let's add another automation lane and do a low pass in. That just goes all the way up. So let's start like there. Alright, so the next thing with this is we could modulate the grain size. So if I go to the envelope, and then if I click the grain size, it'll bring that up. If I go back to the envelope, now I have the grain size. So we could have the grain size kind of increase over time and then decrease again. And then pitching it up will increase the amount of grains that's happening because it has to fill it in more, fill in the space. Let's kind of pitch this up like this. Alright, that's pretty cool. And then let's get some flanger kind of thing out. Freak echo. We can start to just automate this like this. Maybe have the delay time increase and then decrease at the end, so we get kind of a cool pitchy effect. So that's sounding kind of cool. And if you want to do some like compression on something, like if there's parts that are poking out too loud, sometimes it's just about doing a little gain automation. So let's do a little manual compression here on these louder notes, or louder parts of the waveform, so that those aren't poking at us. And then we can turn the whole thing up now. And then maybe it could be cool to like mute it here and then have it come in again like at the end. Even more, like something like that. Maybe do a whole ramp up here. Ooh, I like that sound right there. So with these kind of complex little sound designy sounds, I like to just freeze them right away because they're really useful once they're frozen. Once it's frozen, I like to select it. Ooh, nice long tail on that. So I'm going to select it, copy, and then Control T to make a new track, and then Control V, and then boom, and then unfreeze. And then I'll just mute the old one. And then we could maybe use this sound somewhere else, like maybe right here. So for another step up, I think it could be cool to do a new hat. So what if we do a more relatable hat that might be a nice step up in energy. So I'm going to get a more relatable hat. And let's see how that sounds. Yeah, murder hat. Murda Beats. Murda Beats hat. Alright, so that's really cool. I like it so far. Next thing I'll do is generate some new sounds so that I don't get bored using those basses that I'm already playing with. So I'm going to hit record and record this. So now that all that cool detail is in there, you know, we have some effects, we have all the basics that we need. Now that all that's in there, this next stage is going to sound a lot better. So it's good to take some time to make sure that everything's sounding really cool before you do this next phase, because it'll just be that much more rewarding. So I'm going to go and get the Granulator 2 out, and excuse me, we'll plop our sample into Granulator 2. And then I'm going to put the sample in the, or I'm going to put the Granulator 2 in the pre-master group so that I can easily record it to my pre-master record channel. And then let's do some sound design. So I'm going to make just a long MIDI clip. I'm going to put a couple bars of this C3 with a little space for tail. Let's do an octave up and an octave down. But I find that the octave up and octave down don't always sound as good as the original pitch. So let's do those maybe that much shorter. Bring the loop brace in so that we're just looping that up. And so now I don't have to worry about playing the keyboard with the Granulator 2, so I can use both my fingers or both my hands for knobs. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to get my MIDI Fighter Twister out, and that's just a set of 16 knobs that I can use to control things. And we'll get that, and I'm going to map up the grain size. So, oops, this is in the way. So I'm putting my twister off to the left so I can use my left hand, and then I'm going to use the right hand mouse to mouse around the file position here, because I think that's one of the strongest features of Granulator, is that you can use the mouse to scrub around the file position. A lot of other grain synths don't let you do that, or at least not as easily. So I really want to work with that. So I'm going to Control M, map the grain size, I'm going to map the spray, I'm going to map the scan time and the scan curve. I'm going to hit Command M again to get off this page. I'll turn the time on, and let's, oops, I did this backwards. I have the MIDI twister upside down. Let me turn this right side up. Alright, so grain size, spray, scan time, scan curve, Control M, let's hit this view button, and let's go into the filters, turn the filters off, turn the volume up, turn the voices to 1, turn the velocity, actually we don't need to worry about velocity right now, but let's also map the, what do I want to map? I knew I wanted to map something on this side. That's okay. I don't need to map anything on this side. So those few parameters are what I'm looking for. And now loop this, and then all I have to do is hit record and just play around. So that should be enough to do some cool fills, to get some cool layers, and I think it could be good to just get a new section started, right? So I think my favorite way to get a good section started is to just take a bit of the drum rhythm and paste it after, right? And that's usually what I do to like get another section going. So I think this could be a good breakdown. So let's just see what kind of breakdown we can write with our new granular stuff. So I'm gonna close the bass tops group here, and I'm just gonna make a group specially for these. So I'll make a MIDI instrument. I'll make a group. I'll call the group Granular. And then right here, I'll just plop my sample into the blank sampler. And then we can get our voices to 1. I should have that set as default for this, but I don't because sometimes I like to play melodies and chords. But that should be good. So now we have all this cool granular stuff to chop. And so let's see where our beat is sitting. So to make a feeling of standby or chilled out feeling, I'm going to just get rid of all these kicks and have like one at the end and one at the beginning. So one thing I think is really useful when you're dealing with a lot of atonal sounds and stuff is you can kind of use a breakdown to really establish more of a melodic structure. So I'm going to just really quick write a little progression here in E minor just so that we have something. This has a lot of release on it, so I'm going to just reduce the release on this patch. So this is just a repeating pattern. If we wanted to do the PVRD, we'd just change the second and the fourth iteration. So let me just try popping those up an octave and see how that sounds. So something that's cool with these patches, these kind of wiggly, watery, wet patches, is to have like a physical element to it. So I'm just gonna get a tom drum out. Shout out Lapalux for the tom drum. Oops, I put it in the wrong rack. Put it in here. That's super panny, so I'm gonna just take the left side. So just select the left side. Or actually, it might be the right side that looks fatter. Alright, so let's give it some release. So I'm doing a little ping pong, a little tight ping pong on the tom drum, but it's too wide. So I'm putting a utility on stereo after it, and I'm just gonna bring the width down. Kind of sounds cool reversed, that tom. Let's duplicate it and then re-reverse it so we have one that's reversed and one that's regular. And I'm going to take the delay off the reversey one. What if we did a little backwards, forwards loop on it? So let's take our first patch that we made, our first little call of the call and response here, and let's duplicate that and then use that as kind of a breakdown base. So I'm going to just duplicate that. I'll put it at the top, and then let's get rid of the midis except for one. And let's bring this MIDI over here, and I think if we just low pass it, we could get a kind of a cool deep bass out of this. Cool to have like a response base to that. I'll do the same kind of PVRD thing here, but kind of in a different rhythm. But we'll still kind of keep that first. So it could be cool for this one to just be kind of a wobbly bass thing. So if I could do that by reducing the release here. And then the filter envelope actually has a looping mode. So if you put it on loop, then you can loop it. And if you put it on trigger, then it will trigger the loop start at the start of the MIDI note. So that can be useful if you're using unsynced times, which I'm going to play around with. I think the one that loops is, or the triggers on the loop is maybe just loop. And you can't remember, or you can't forget about your reverb on the bass. You don't want to forget about that because it'll get in the way like it is right now. Where is that reverb coming from? Okay, so we need to automate this down, yeah. So we'll bring that down. We could maybe bring it in at the end because it sounded cool. So we can find a loop in this too. So let's kind of find a loop first before we do the filter thingy. Oh yeah, that's kind of nice right there. So let's loop a part of that up and get a kind of a cool loopy bass. So if you turn up the crossfade, it'll give you a little bit smoother of a loop. EQ to just get that lead out of the way, because the lead is taking up all the space. So let's do a little bit of an Abbey Road on this lead to see if we can't make it feel a little bit deeper, a little bit more away from your face. So we could maybe have this open up over time, but do like a little bit of a fractal opening up. So this is a good example of a fractal. You can have a ramp that's opening up like this, and then duplicate that ramp, and then over the whole course of this, we can then scale it. So it's a ramp that's ramping, and that's what I'm talking about with the fractals. It's a shape that's doing the same shape while it's doing the littler version of that same shape, if that makes sense. I'm doing that all the time in my music. Could be cool to kind of modulate this filter even more, just like this. Alright, so now we're getting a little bit of a new section going, but before I get too far, I want to listen to it in context, because I could be writing a section that makes no sense. So let's see how this sounds in context. And while I'm doing that, I'll also just do a little bit of muting on that bass group so that we can put in some fills. So on our bass group, I can get or actually on the bass tops group, I'll put a utility. And this is my 0 dB top gain preset, which is basically just macroed utility so that I can use the whole range. So top of the macro is at 0 dB, bottom is minus infinity. And I can just start to increase the grid here and just input little mutes wherever I think we could use a freshening up. I do like the fills here. So let's do some granular now. So I'll just steal one of these MIDI notes, and if I bring this granular up above the bass group, then I can really see, or above the top bass group, I can really see where my mutes are. So then I can just plop MIDI notes wherever. Oops, I'm trying to put it on the group. Yeah, so I can plop a MIDI note in there wherever I feel is a good point. and I'll give a little bit of room on that tail, and then I'll give a little bit of attack and a little bit of release, like I said, and I am gonna go pee. If you have any questions, now is a good time to ask them. Exit if you're still here. I don't know if you're still here, but yeah. So I'm gonna take a piss. All right. So, ooh, it's starting to rain. All right, I'm gonna end this soon. Let's use the second sample. I think the second sample was. Wait, is that the sample? Oh. Oh, what the hell? I thought that was longer. I totally thought that was a longer sample, but whatever. Ooh. So much fun. So much fun. This doesn't look like the right sample. What is going on here? This is the sample I want. Okay. Oh my gosh. I was just using the bounce as that. Okay. So now I have the right sample. I'll put the right sample in this one. Plop. All right. Now we can do granular stuff. stops right there. Pitch envelope on this. I stole a MIDI note with a pitch envelope on it. So let me go and just turn that off. Sometimes it's useful to put the bass mono on at like 200 or 300. Ooh, and then here's a nice long one coming up. So this will be fun. Sometimes it's fun to just modulate the transpose on these, so let's do that. Just keep duplicating it. Just keep duplicating it. Put it in the new spot. So maybe we're gonna put this one here. So maybe for that one, we'll just tweak the pitch bend. Ooh, there's a nice long one here. This will be fun. duplicate this even more. So what if we have that, and then it's like a two-parter? So like I'll duplicate that, and then it like kind of blends into this one. Alright, so then for this, we want to just do a PVRD, so we have a P and a V, but now we're going to duplicate it so that we have a PV and an R, and now we have a D. So we'll put the D right here, and let's just change this one. Maybe modulate the transpose again. And then for our second iteration here on the melody, maybe we bring this up. And I think a more consistent hat would be good. Just as a regular old quarter note hat. What if we duplicate that hat and we have a new hat that's kind of pitched down more? What if we reverse it? Alright, what if we have a little more kick drum going on? Actually reverse automation. If you control and then shift and then hover over the skew mark, you can actually reverse it, which is pretty nifty, right? So then we can have it come back down at the end, but then maybe not quite so fast. So we could maybe stretch this out like this. Alright, so for our intro, let's do the melody, and then let's maybe cut it off like 2 bars before. So we could cut it off right there. And let's do like let's do a snare switch up quick, because I feel like that helps with the switch up. So this is more of a subtle switch up, this bass switch up that I did right here. So we could try maybe a different snare drum. So remember I created a duplicate of our snare. So I'm going to consolidate those and then take it off fold and shift this up one, and now we have a new snare. And let's just change this snare to be like a little bit more hype. So so it could be cool to have a lower snare after that. So actually I'll get like a 808 tom. Yeah, some 808 tom, and I'll put that in there, and then I get the align delay, and I can play around with offsetting this. So by milliseconds, if I hit this lock and then turn it up, we can start getting a flam between the snare and this tom. And if I pitch the tom up, it'll sound more like a snare. So I'll pitch it up like 7 semitones. Alright, and then I'm also going to duplicate this snare again. And let's just put a clap in here instead. So just for the, I'm going to use this for the breakdown. So let's use a Sephiroth clap. So then right here, it'll feel more like a breakdown because it won't have such an intense snare happening. So let's go to the clap. Let's try the tom in there. So it's high pitched, so it still feels like, you know, the journey's growing, you know, the snare's pitching around. Yeah, so then we could use this as our intro drums, and just by deleting all the kick drums, and then I'm gonna just freeze this. Oh, you can't freeze it, so I'm just gonna sample the kick snare. Boom, boom. Alright, so that's our snare. We want to just loop that up. Delete the old. So this will be our build snare. So this is a very wide sound, and one thing I've been playing around with lately is just doing like modulating the width on utility on wide sounds. So what if we have it start out super mono and then like grow over time like this? And then we could also have this come out of lo-fi realm. So I have a plugin called Lo-Fi AF by Plugin Alliance. And this is really good for those lo-fi sounds. So we put this before that utility, that way it's also being modulated by the width. With this hat, or with this clap, I'm just going to low pass it in. Oh, there's a way to turn that noise off when you're not using the plugin. Let's see. Follow the transport. Or envelope follow. Okay. So if you set that to envelope follower, the noise won't be going all the time. Build snare. I'm just going to filter it in, basic bitch style. So I'll set that at the cutoff and then just modulate that cutoff up. And then I think the last thing for this intro would be a good ambience, whatever. And I have a file of those on deck, so let me just grab one of those. I'm liking the sound of that. So I'm going to just render this whole track out and call it quits. So yeah, let's go. All right. Wait, was that lo-fi effect on during that part? Let me check if that lo-fi effect was on. Kind of sounds like it was. Yeah, it was. Wait. No, it wasn't. Okay, cool. All right, so I hope you learned something. If you're wondering where I would go next, I would take this, and I would duplicate time, and then I would take both of these groups. I would take the bass group and the upper tonal group, and yeah, so the bass group has the granular group in it. So I would duplicate both of those and then change all the stuff for the second drop. So I would basically duplicate this whole bass group. But I actually don't need to duplicate the sub with it, so I'll just duplicate the granular. But actually the granular, I can just easily duplicate those inside here, so I don't need to duplicate the group. But sometimes when you have a lot of samplers, it's nice to just duplicate the group. So I'll just go ahead and duplicate that entire group. Right? That way it's in a nice little container for me. And I can duplicate the old stuff. Boom. And now I have 32 more bars of drop. I could put a build up. You know, the build up doesn't have to be 16 bars. It could be 8 bars, but maybe we could get away with 16 bars. It'd be pretty neat to have an extra long build up. You know, we could go really ham with this second build up and like could do more drum stuff. And then, you know, so that the second build up is more intense than the first. And then to make the second drop more intense than the first drop, you know, it's just going to be a matter of resequencing some of these sounds in a way that hits even harder, even more fun. And yeah, so I'll change the group color here and call this drop 2. This will be called drop 1. And yeah, so that's what I would do to create a second drop for this track. Let's go ahead and turn this up. Hell yeah. So that was hella fun. Nailed it. Nailed it. Let's listen again. Should we hear it through a mastering plugin? I like to check after a session. I do like to just listen to it through Newfangled Elevate, just to see, you know, what the kick sounds like once it's being pushed. So I can tell now that I'm pushing it through the master that the sub might not be loud enough in comparison to the top basses on some of those. since this drop is very like chaotic, I'd probably go minimal for the first half of the second drop. So like something super simple like just a kick, snare, and a more consistent hi-hat with like my favorite of these bass chops, just looping, doing like a cool rhythm, and then bring in some of those granular sounds as little top layers and start calling and responding with just some of the more subtle top layers while we have like a real consistent bass that you can kind of let ride out with maybe some more like percussion and stuff driving it and less about the bass phrasing driving it. And then for the B section of drop 2, return back to like something chaotic that's even more chaotic, like a granulated version of that A section of second drop. That could be pretty neat. So there's a lot of ways you can just continue to fractal your stuff out, and it creates a really cohesive sounding mix because it doesn't sound like everyone. It doesn't sound like you just took a bunch of samples and slapped them together, and it doesn't sound like you duplicated a patch a bunch of times and changed it so much that there's like too much variation in the timbre. It's nice to have, you know, a certain cohesion to the mix, I feel, and this is the method that I've found that gives me that result relatively painlessly, easily, and quickly, especially if, like you saw, you just have long samples laying around from old tracks. This is a completely different sounding track. Let's listen to this real quick. I'll play Mad Contagious, and you can hear the difference. Let me pull up Mad Contagious real quick. I think I have it uploaded. Don't look at any of my unreleased tracks. Don't look at any of these. Don't look at any of these. You can't see any of these. Okay. Boom. Mad Contagious V1. That's all you get for right now. That's all you get for right now. So, yeah, so that's the same sample as this. Like, it sounds like the same bass, but it's a completely different track. So, you know, you can use these long samples multiple times. And you notice I only used one sample, and that was just for the sake of simplicity and creative limitation, but oftentimes I'll grab two different long samples that kind of set each other apart from each other, you know, like they contrast each other well, and then I'll call and respond between those. And that is often a really good trick. Or even you can use three. So you can use one long sample for the P, a different long sample for the V, and then a third long sample for the D, right? So PVRD, remember PVRD, present, vary, repeat, differentiate. And present, vary, repeat, destroy on maybe the second round. So like the first round, it's just differentiate, right? This is just the differentiate. But on the second D, I destroy it by completely throwing out the sound and replacing it with a completely different sound. Right, so that's a destructive thing where like I'm just destroying the expectation of there to be a bass at the end of that phrase. Then for the second turnaround, or the last destroy, I destroy it by like just leaving space, you know? Right. So, I hope that all makes sense. And yeah, comment, questions, all that. If you're interested in getting these sounds or sounds like them, I have a Patreon where I sell sounds every month. I'm going to be doing edited tutorial videos. So imagine this, but more concise. And that's going to be dropping on my Patreon probably in July or August 2022. And I'm going to start doing that monthly on like a $25 tier. So I'm going to put a lot more work into those than I do into these live streams. And we're going to be diving even deeper into like specifics of sound design and conceptual specifics. And I want to be able to create these videos that kind of link all the different topics together into one concise kind of like beat making tutorial video series. So yeah, keep an eye out for that. And yeah, go stream my music on Spotify and SoundCloud and anywhere else. And yeah, I love you. Thanks for your support. Till next time, I'm Sephiros. Big up. Peace.